Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see some folks taking their seats and joining us. It's Tuesday, AJ. It's lunchtime.
It is
Is it
lunchtime.
lunchtime? Normally
I
I
mean,
go home after this. This is weird. I don't know how I
who
feel.
eats lunch at 1 o'clock? I eat lunch at like 11:30.
No, I ate lunch already. I ate lunch already as well. Yeah. But lunch and learn. No lunch will be provided, but there will be lots of learning for folks.
We
Um,
should give away a free lunch.
there's no such thing as a free lunch. Don't you know that? I
In
don't.
investing? Yeah, I set you up for that one. You're welcome.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Oh, somebody's eating lunch. That's nice. In the chat. So, got a few folks joining us here today. We're back year five of Rent versus Buy. Hard to believe. We've done it that many times.
Truly.
Yeah, so give folks another second to get settled in, but we're about ready to get started. And before we get started, we're curious, is this a good time slot to have a webinar? What time of day works well? So we threw a poll out there. We like this timing. We don't like this timing. I want a morning live event. I want an afternoon session. I want after work. Lunch and learn's ideal. Fill out the poll. We're trying to just get some more information so that we know when a good time is to have something like this where you can participate and join. And so if you're eating something good for lunch, I had some grilled chicken breast, some pasta, some steamed
Oh,
vegetables, you know. Yeah.
oh.
So yeah. So all right, we are ready to go. Buckle up your tray tables. Let's jump in. It is a Freaky Friday edition of Rent versus Buy. And AJ, it's Tuesday, so why are we calling it Freaky Friday?
We are calling it Freaky Friday because this is the fifth edition of this webinar, and every single other edition, the past four times, I have argued for the buy side of things. Unsuccessfully, I might add. You have won. Each time with your very compelling debating skills, which you honed really in high school, I think, John, when you were
Oh.
very, very popular. Um, just trying to psych you out here. But no, today we're gonna flip. So John's gonna bring us through kind of like an up-to-date state of the market. Are mortgage rates low? Are housing prices falling? Is it better to rent or buy? John's gonna bring us through some updates. I'm going to argue rent, and then John is going to argue buy. And then we have a ton of questions from
Yeah.
folks who submitted questions ahead of time. Thank you for these excellent questions, by the way. I was just reading through them before we hopped on. Excited to answer those live. But please, please throw stuff in the chat. John and I will be active in the chat. If you have a question you want us to answer live, we will do that for you.
Yeah, awesome. No, good to be here. Thank you, Jamie Lee Curtis, and our
Hmm.
Freaky Friday. That would make me Lindsay Lohan, I guess. Anyway, nonetheless, here we are. It is Freaky Friday
Yes, I
edition.
am your mother in this situation.
Got it. And I hate you. No, I'm kidding. No, here we are. That's AJ Ayers. I'm John Owens. We're here to talk about rent versus buy. We're going to talk about the interest rate environment, the state of the housing market, why to rent, why to buy. Dive into your Q&A. And then we'll ask you at the end who won, which side wins. So that's what we're doing here today. Before we get started, fasten your tray tables, mute your Slack notifications. There's a lot of content here. Drop questions in the Q&A box. We'll either try to answer it live or at the end. We'll put a webinar of this recording up in the next week or so on brooklynfi.com. It'll end up on YouTube. We'll put it in our newsletter. And if there are topics you would like to hear about in the future discussed on this a future live event for Brooklyn FI, let us know so that we can get that scheduled, right? We love doing these. So let's agree, let's set the table. What are some ground rules here? We're going to assume that house prices appreciate about 3% a year. Some areas are a little bit higher than that. You know, if you live in the Bay Area, that sort of thing. Average rents in New York, average rents overall increase about 2% a year. In New York City, it is quite higher than that. We've got some updated data we'll talk about. Most people stay in their home for about 7 years. It's unlikely that you are ever going to pay off that 30-year mortgage, right? Most people don't stay in their house for 30 years. And we can expect a portfolio to make about 8% annually over the long run, looking at some historical averages there. And so just something to keep in mind when we're comparing some of these decisions we need to make. So let's take a deep dive. What's the rental market right now, especially in New York City, where many of our viewers are based. Many of our clients are based. And so one bedroom here in Manhattan, just a meager $5,116 a month in July. That was an 8% increase year over year. And so the median Manhattan rent also jumped about $300 over the past year. In Brooklyn, a little bit lower, 4,200 and change in 2025, up from 4,100, so about 5% increase instead of 8. And so we have that. The biggest rent increase in the Brooklyn side of things was on the 3 bedrooms. Their average rate went up by 18% to $7,100 a month. But it's actually the best deal if you think about it. If you're splitting it with 3 other people, you're spending quite a bit less. So
Yeah, your toddler and your newborn. Yeah,
exactly,
they're
exactly.
really gonna chip in for that.
They don't contribute much.
A 3-year-old. I mean, really.
Future child star, I think you mean.
There you go.
But yes, yes. So rents continue to rise in the city. No surprise there for anybody who has a lease. Mortgage rates might be coming down. We do have a forecast here that's up to date based on the latest Fed meeting. And so take what you will from this chart on where we see the interest rate environment going. Current state of
Sorry, can we just go back for a second?
Yes, yes. Sorry. I don't know what's not clear.
Imagine someone is listening to a recording of this without the visual. What are we looking at here?
Oh, okay. Well, if you're looking at the recording this without the visual, we're looking at a meme that's making fun of mortgage rates being drawn in crayon, which I think might be more accurate than most economists or especially real estate agents' expectations around the.
We don't know. This is what we're saying. We're saying we have no idea. We might see rates drop. The way the economy has been behaving over the past 8 years has sort of defied all of our economics textbooks. So we're expecting rates to drop. We don't know where housing supply is going. Unfortunately, the answer is nobody knows. So it's really hard to make predictions. So therefore, when we talk to our clients about this decision, should you rent or should we buy, you're going to see us focusing a lot more on personal life planning and decisions for you rather than the numbers, because the answer is we don't know, especially if you're going to be in that house for 7 years, which historically has been an entire economic cycle, or potentially 30 years if you're going to pay off that whole mortgage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so definitely we've got some more scientific charts coming up here in a second. And so right now interest rates are higher and they've been there for about 3 years now. Housing prices are starting to fall slightly. We'll take a look at that in a second. It's improved year over year, but it's still a hell of a lot harder than it was 4 or 5 years ago to have an affordable mortgage payment, largely because of rates and housing supply. So let's take a quick peek at some of the data and what's happened with rates. And so the Fed cut rates by 25 basis points, right? That's finance parlance, for 1/4% on 9/17. But you can see here, that's the first time the Fed cut rates in about a year. And so there has not been a ton of movement on interest rates for quite some time. Normally when rates go down, house prices go up. And remember, just because the Fed cuts their rates, that's not a one-to-one relationship with mortgage rates, because mortgage rates are often tied to the 30-year Treasury, and that market is more complicated than just what the Federal Reserve does. It's related, but there's not a one-to-one correlation there. And so let's look at historical interest rates. Right now, beginning of September, we're sitting about 6.5% average rate for a 30-year mortgage, much higher than it had been for many years coming out of the global financial crisis, but much lower than what it was like before the global financial crisis. And if you perhaps bought a home in the 1980s, you probably had a much higher rate than that, or your parents, your grandparents did, much higher interest rate than that. And so these rates are fairly normal. They're just abnormal based on what we're used to anchoring to. So that's what rates look like right now. And so a little bit lower than they were a year ago when we did this presentation, AJ. Housing prices remain high, but actually came down. This is the first time we're doing this where housing prices actually dropped.
Down, right?
They've come down, yeah.
Yep.
About $25,000 in the median housing price. And so it was about $428 last year. It's about $403 this year. And so, yeah, we have seen a little bit of price movement down. We're just kind of rare. Just looking at this chart, right? It's a pretty rare thing. I'd be shocked if we saw the average price a year from now at $325. That would probably take some kind of major economic collapse or something to happen for them to drop that much. But we did see a little bit of house of housing prices come down. And the reason why is because the housing supply has improved a little bit. So probably the best we've seen on the housing supply in a couple of years here. And so we have not over 9 months supply of housing. About a year ago, we were probably closer to 8, 7 months on the market. And so overall, if supply goes up, then prices can come down. Economics 101 there. The real question is, will rates start to come down? And will we start to see folks with lower interest rates be more eager to buy homes and in turn flip that around and that house price increases again? So, and then just some quick data on New York City. Average rent in New York, 3,700 a month, dropped a little bit month over month, but increased year over year. Yeah, prices keep going up. That's the TLDR, folks. So, AJ, team rent.
Let's go.
Good luck.
Let's go. I just
Godspeed.
want everyone to know that the mortgage on the house that I'm currently sitting in is 8.75%. So just let that sink in. I'm happy to answer any questions about why I made that decision, but sitting here, that feels pretty high based on the average you just showed me, John. So let's get into why renting is the better call for most people. Reasons to rent. Number 10, browsing on Zillow is a hobby, not an investment. I spend a lot of time on Zillow. I consider myself somewhat an expert of the New York City housing market. I track prices very carefully, both in the interest of having good information to talk to our clients about, but also for my own personal interest because I live here in Brooklyn. There is a bit of this, don't get caught up with what your friends are doing. You do not know the circumstances of what your friends or what your siblings or what your colleagues are doing. Often, those folks are in different financial circumstances. We may see that our college roommate is able to afford to purchase a 3-bedroom home for their 2 children, but you feel like you can't get ahead, even though you have the same job. What you don't know is that they were gifted a 6-figure down payment from grandma or a great aunt. So a great reason to rent is that buying a home is just sometimes completely unaffordable. We just don't have the ability to get that down payment together. And also, here's a fun fact for you. Don't assume that every home on Zillow is a good investment. This screenshot on the left here, this Zestimate of $995,000 for looks like a beautiful condo in Palm Springs. That is my actual condo. And that Zestimate is lower than what I paid for my condo 2 years ago. Palm Springs is a hot rental market, is a hot buyer and sellers market. It is one of those outliers that real estate agents have told us actually grow more than 3% a year. But in my specific experience, this is just purely anecdotal, my housing price growth has actually been negative over a 2-year period. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, John Owens. Another great reason to rent. Home values don't always go up. If we're thinking of our house as an investment, we are thinking of this question the wrong way.
If your aunt's going to give you money for something, your great aunt's going to give you money. She'd be my greatest aunt, if you ask me. That's the greatest aunt you can have.
Thank you. Number 9, reason to rent. Buying a home is not as easy as you think. We have been sold a culture of just go on Redfin and pay 1% to a broker, sign some paperwork, no problem, get the down payment together, write a check, and your keys are yours. It is much more complicated than that, especially in New York City. You need to gather the troops. You need to have a whole team of people behind you. You need to have a real estate attorney. You need to have a broker. You need to have an inspector. You need to have a lender. Often there are other people that need to come in to help you get permits through, especially if you're going to do any renovations, which almost you always will, because nobody will get to that in a minute. So it's not as easy as you think. And all of these people require payment. And all of these people require your time and also your energy to make sure that you are getting the best advice. Having a bad inspector who you saved $200 on could be the reason that you did not notice that your foundation had a crack in it. And the house that you thought you were paying $650,000 for ends up needing a $200,000 foundation repair. So just be very conscious of this whole team of people that you need to have in place. That said, if you are going to buy at Brooklyn FI, we know a ton of these people in various communities. So we've got great recommendations for people that we do trust. We have trusted brokers, inspectors that we've personally used that did a good job, that caught the things that could be headaches later. Again, this emotional roller coaster. John, I don't know if you've been through this, but it is very emotional to fall in love with a home, think that you have all your savings that you've been working your whole life towards, put in an offer on your dream home, only to find out that they had an accepted offer yesterday. And if you want that dream home, which you've already anchored yourself to, you have to come up with another, I don't know, $100,000, $200,000 in cash by tomorrow, by the way, to update your offer, really within 30 days by the time escrow closes. It is very emotional. So if you are in a relationship and you're not fully aligned on renting versus buying, the actual process of going to purchase a home can be very stressful on that relationship. And again, we're talking about the emotional implications of this decision. The numbers tell us renting is almost always better, right? That's at the end of the day, when we run our rent versus buy analysis, if you are able to stay in a home that you like and your rent increases at those numbers John talked about earlier, and you're able to put a little bit of money away in the stock market, you will almost always end up better financially renting. So we're not talking about dollar compared with dollar here. We're talking about which is better for you personally. Finally, markets like New York City, San Francisco, LA, we rarely get reprieve from the housing market decreases. I was talking about Palm Springs, where the price had decreased. Los Angeles, New York, you mentioned we're maybe seeing a little bit of a correction, but for the most part, these prices are only going up and they're only getting more expensive. So that's why we like renting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's another thing that makes it a little bit simpler to rent, which is you don't need to pay all those big commissions.
Are you on team rent or team buy?
Well, I can play both sides of it.
Okay. Low transaction costs, aka lighting money on fire, as we.
But this is one thing that's changed since last year, right? In New York in particular, right?
Yes, exactly. So you don't have to come up with 20% of $1 million to buy a 1-bedroom here in New York City. You get to keep that money, and you get to invest it in the market. And as we'll see later, investing in the market often outperforms that 3%, or in my case, negative growth of the value of the asset that you hold, which is your house. Another thing is you don't necessarily have to pay transaction costs to real estate agents. There was a change in the law. It used to be this sort of standard 6% you would pay as the seller of the home, and that 6% commission, 6% off the total purchase price, would be split between the broker on the seller side and on the buyer side. There was a law that was passed, which amazingly got through the lobbyists at the National Association of Realtors, which, by the way, outspends the NRA, just in case anyone was wondering. They are the biggest lobbying group in this country, if that tilts you in any direction here. Now you can shop this cost. Now you don't have to pay the 6%. However, I have heard through the grapevine that that is not the norm. Brokers are still expecting their 6%. So yes, in a perfect world, you have the ability to shop it. But for the most part, you are looking at very high transaction costs of at least 6% on the way out. When you rent, maybe you have a transaction cost of 1 to 3 months of rent. So if you're going to stay in that apartment for, more than 3 years, you're going to easily amortize that cost. It's going to be minimal.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing this happen with broker fees for rentals in New York as well, where a lot of times that's no longer being shouldered by the tenant, which is a change, right?
Yep. Exactly. Number 7, property taxes, assessments, and HOA fees keep going up. So I hear this argument a lot that once you have a mortgage, you've got this fixed cost, right? Buying is so great because rents can go up and, your landlord could not want to re-sign the lease. You don't have a lot of security because you have this fixed cost on your mortgage. But that's only part of your housing payment. Rent is negotiated and renewed each year. We know that. And if you don't like it, you just move, right? We all know moving is a pain in the ass and it's expensive, but we're talking about a, $5,000 to $10,000 cost and 2 to 3 months of temporary discomfort. Having to sell a house you don't like because your HOA fees got too expensive is a lot harder to do than just breaking a lease 3 months early and moving. HOA fees, we're talking about if you're in a condo, you're in a co-op, or it doesn't have to be in New York City. It could be in a suburb. A lot of times there are these homeowners associations where you pay dues in to keep the streets looking nice and the signs painted and the grass uniform. It's just to kind of keep things around your home, not what's in it, functioning. That's effectively what an HOA is. Typically in New York City, we see fees of between $800 and $1,000 per bedroom. And if we're talking about new construction, those fees can actually be quite higher. So when you're looking at a mortgage on a place that's a couple $1,000,000, don't forget to check out the HOA fee, because it's probably at least half of your mortgage in some cases in some of these newer constructions. So when you look at those like beautiful websites for like 11 Hoyt Street, if anyone in New York has seen those, it's a beautiful building in downtown Brooklyn. Those HOA fees, there's a golf simulator, there's a swimming pool, all those amenities, like someone's got to pay for them, and it's going to be you if you're buying in that building. So
When are you moving in, AJ? It sounds like you're pretty
well,
familiar.
no, the HOA is too high. I want to. It's gorgeous. I would love to live there, but the HOA is like $4,000 a month for a 3-bedroom. No, thank you. Oh, sorry, just a quick one. Assessments. For those of you who have never lived in a condo before, an assessment is a surprise bill. So your mortgage might be fixed, your HOA duties might be fixed, but for example, in the last apartment I lived in, the exterior foundation something was cracked, and there was a $50,000 assessment that was assessed that was on each person. So each individual apartment, each shareholder had to pay $50,000 over a year period to get that fixed. And what we did is we sued them instead of actually paying it. So a lot of complicated stuff happens when you're buying. I realize my approach for this debate is to tell you everything that's wrong with buying as someone who has bought. So learn from my mistakes, folks, and rent. It's very, very clear.
Hashtag she's not bitter.
All right, diversification. When you save for a long time and you put a large chunk of money as a down payment, you are concentrating a lot of your wealth in one asset. Now, most of the time, it's a good idea, right? Most of the time, you're building equity in something that you can probably sell in a few years, hopefully for a profit. In my case, probably not. So you have this opportunity to invest. However, you are putting it in one single asset. You are very concentrated. For those of our clients who have work at companies where they're issued stock options or have restricted stock units, you've probably heard us talk about concentration risk. It is risky to have all of your net worth tied up in one company. It is risky to have a lot of your net worth tied up in one building. Things happen, especially if you're in places like coastal Florida or coastal California, or apparently the middle of Texas. Like, we are in an environment where the great forces of Mother Nature can suddenly destroy your home. And yes, we can buy insurance to protect ourselves against that, but anyone who has been through a natural disaster, like the fires in LA, knows that it's not that easy. If your entire home is destroyed and you owned it, it is very difficult to recuperate that full amount back. So having all of your assets, or a large percent of your assets, concentrated in this one building, not a good idea. Let's spread that around. Let's diversify. Let's own lots of different things via the stock market. Not a great investment, right? We've already covered this. Prices appreciate a few percentage points. John saying an average, we've agreed for the purpose of this debate, 3%.
There were rules to the debate.
There were rules.
Okay, the moderators, and we all met.
3% on average. And look, everyone's going to have survivorship bias. You are going to hear a story from someone who says, you're crazy. 3% is way too low. Actually, it's 15%. And we can gerrymander our data here, right? We can say, well, 15%, if you take out this little corner that was didn't do so well, and we look at this and we look at the comps for your specific house, yes, your investment grew 11% per year. That's very risky because, again, we're just looking at this one single building. So my preference here is to rent. Whatever money you've saved for potential down payment, put it in the stock market and get rich without a headache and a divorce, right? We're trying to avoid conflict here. And
or a haircut like this, AJ. That was quite a phase for you.
That was not a good phase. That was my renovation phase. If you don't love me during my renovation phase, you don't deserve me at my best, or whatever that is. It's illiquid, folks. You can pull out some of your home equity. If you know, made a large down payment, maybe you have a small mortgage or you're a couple years into your mortgage and you have a lot of equity built up, you can borrow against it. It's called a home equity line of credit or a HELOC that is available to you. Haven't heard a ton of folks loving HELOCs, right? You're borrowing against yourself. You're taking equity out. You're paying to borrow. So if we have the opportunity to rent, we're in a market like New York City where renting often does make sense, and you have the opportunity to not lock up that down payment, I suggest that you take it.
Yeah. One of the reasons why we haven't seen HELOCs be very popular as of late as well is because they're tied to prime in
Yeah,
terms of their rate. And so their rates are even higher than most mortgage rates that are typically tied to the 30-year treasury. So
yeah, so what we're seeing play out is, you know, you bought your house in, I don't know, 2022, your mortgage rate is 3.5%. That's great. You know, have a $300,000 down payment, you've built up $400,000 of equity, but like you're going to be paying, if you go through a traditional provider, what, 7-8% on that HELOC?
maybe 8.5% on a HELOC right now. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. I'd rather live off dividends. Thanks so much. Another reason to rent, nobody keeps their house the way that it is. Renovations cost a lot of money, always go over budget, both in time and money. We're not allowed to, my chief compliance officer is on the call with me right now, but I will say something. I can guarantee
No, she can't.
that anytime you do a renovation, it will cost more and it will take longer than you think it will.
Okay,
Only thing I
she's
can
right about
guarantee
that.
in all of financial planning.
Probably accurate.
And this is an expense that I often see ignored when we hear someone arguing for the incredible power of real estate, right? You know, you can diversify your money by owning a bunch of rental properties. We don't really factor in the $50,000 renovation. These are real costs that require real cash flow. So think about that when you are doing the Zillow shopping and you are going to those open houses. You're going, oh, this is so cute. What if we redid the bathroom? 75 grand, right? That's how much it costs to renovate a bathroom. People are going to argue with me, but like it can cost that much if you have to move the toilet or you discover something unpleasant beneath the floorboards, which does happen. Next slide, please.
Indeed. Indeed. Here we go. Number 3.
What is this? Selling your house is hard.
This was the litigation. I think this is a throwback to the litigation on the co-op.
Yeah, selling your house is hard. My husband and I tried to sell our condo we put it on the market in June of 2020. And we eventually sold it in October of 2023. So more than 3 years later, because there was some very boring nonsense lawsuit through one of the construction companies that we had hired to fix something with the condo or the co-op. So this idea that, oh, we can always sell it, you know, oh, we're moving to Austin for so-and-so's job for a few years. Let's buy a house. We can always sell it. Austin's a great housing market. We could just buy it. We'll, you know, do it up a little bit and then we'll sell it in a few years. It's not as easy as that, right? We are making decisions, this huge decision for you based on data that's based on thousands of transactions. So just because the average says the average time to close is 30 days, what if you're the outlier average that is 3 years? Like that could be you. So if you're making big decisions based on these assumptions, don't. That's my advice. Is like if you have temporary less than 5-year potential changes in your life, it almost always makes sense to rent. And yeah,
AJ,
what's up?
I was going to add to my anecdote, right? I looked at some condos earlier this summer, and one of them was listed for, I don't know, let's say $389 was the price. This was in June, right? I didn't buy it. Got a text from my real estate agent, first time in a while, and she said, "Hey, they cut the price. It's $350 now, 4.5 months later." And so I'm assuming these folks thought they were going to sell it a lot sooner than that, and not be carrying it into and now the winter is coming and they don't want to carry an empty property through the winter and they're trying to move it.
Right. And they might just carry it through the winter and then that's a whole year of lost growth in the market, right? They were probably counting on that cash sale and then moving that into their retirement accounts and they have to wait. And I don't know what their situation is, but that sounds messy to me.
Doesn't sound fun. They should have threw in a free pizza.
Everyone loves free pizza, right? I mean, I'll do anything for a free pizza. Let's be serious. Number two, cash flow. When you rent, you know what your rent is. It says it in your rental agreement. Yes, it might go up when your lease is renewed, but for at least a year. By the way, I always recommend trying to negotiate 2 and 3 year leases, even if you're not sure you're going to be there. It's a lot easier to break your lease than it is to try and renew it if the market is heating up. So yeah, that's your rent. And if something breaks, you call your super and they fix it. Or you call your landlord and they come and fix it. Some are better than others. I do hear this a lot. I'm really sick of my super never comes. This is the worst. I need to buy a house because I can't get my toilet fixed. You don't need to buy a house. You just need a different apartment. Like you have a bad super situation. You might
Or a different toilet.
Or a different toilet, yeah. And look, I have heard of people who, have agreements with their landlords where they're like, hey, I do plan on staying here for 10 or 15 years. I'm a good tenant. They're not gonna let you sign a 10-year lease, but hey, I'll take care of this apartment. Like if something breaks, I'll take care of it. I won't bother you. That makes you a very attractive tenant, and the likelihood that your landlord is going to raise your rent is very low at that point. And we see these kind of handshake deals all the time in rental markets like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. These are complex markets, so it's really hard to say, oh, well, buying is better because you get to own your place. If you're owning a condo in New York City, you don't own your place. You own a building with 16 other residents or more, hundreds potentially.
All right. And number one, the last reason why you should rent.
Number one, flexibility. Are you quitting your job? Is your girlfriend breaking up with you? Are you moving across the country? Are you doing all three at once like John Owens did in 2020 or 2019?
Whoops. Yeah. Been there, done that.
Renting it's quick and easy. If you see a place you like, you typically let the person know that you want it that day, and you potentially put a deposit down, and the keys are yours, on the 1st or the 15th, whichever comes first. It's a fairly painless transaction. And again, moving sucks, but that should not be a reason to deter you from moving from one rental to another. It can take years and it can be very expensive to move out of a home that you own. I broke a lease a couple years ago. We had 3 months left on our lease and we tried to negotiate and they said, nope, you owe it. And you know what? We ate the cost. And in this grand scheme of things, it was a good financial move and it hurt at the time. But honestly, I'd forgotten about it until this moment. And it did not, in fact, affect my long-term financial health. So that concludes my case for renting. Actually, I have one more meme as part of my, can you click? There's like, maybe I did a bad animation here. Oh no.
Is there something else?
Oh no. Anyway, I was supposed to show you a series of emails. That these are really emails from my HOA board or my HOA. I get emails all day long. The doorbell isn't working. The toilet is overflowing. The refuse room is a disgusting mess. And it's just annoying when you are busy living your life and doing your job to hear people fighting and calling each other names about the toilet that someone left in the trash room, which is disgusting. So
it's the group chat that you didn't sign up for and you cannot easily leave.
Yes. And costs $800 a month to be in.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds very exclusive club. Awesome. Well, thank you, AJ, for holding down Team Rent with all that propaganda. Let's jump into the reasons why you should buy instead of rent. First reason to buy, number 10, access to cheap or gifted capital. Your great aunt Hilda will not give you $100,000 towards your rent or towards your diversified portfolio. She's probably worried that you might invest it in GameStop or Bitcoin or something crazy like that. But she might leave you some money for a down payment on a home. Grandma might do that. Mom and dad might do that. And, older generations are very much attached to real estate and home ownership. And therefore, they will sometimes incentivize you to do that, just like all the old people in Congress do, right? Incentivize you to buy a home through tax deductions, tax breaks that they give you for that. And so, one of the few times that you will get access to gifted capital from folks and getting some help there. Another reason to buy, mortgages are pretty cool. You can write off the interest on your mortgage. Somebody's lending you money. You get the benefit of leverage. And what leverage is that I don't have $1 million to buy a home right now, but I have $200,000 to put a down payment on it. And somebody's going to give me $800,000 at 6.5% interest and let me pay that off over time. And there's not a lot of things that places will give you $800,000 at 6.5% interest to buy, right? But they will let you do that for real estate, and banks and they'll come in and do that. And so that's the perk. And then even if somebody would give you $800,000 at 6.5% interest for something, they're typically not letting you pay it back over 30 years. Maybe they're letting you pay it back over 5 or 7 if you're buying a business. Mortgages are pretty cool in that sense. And right, you do maintain the flexibility to refinance, often without a penalty or very little penalty, which is very nice. But you don't want to bank on that. You never want to buy a home that you can ultimately that you need to refinance in order for it to be affordable. So those are some reasons to buy. Let's just kind of go through how that mortgage math works. And so at a 3% interest rate, right, 20% down, $1 million home, year one, you may be able to write off about $23,000 in mortgage interest. And in year 30, you're writing off $650, right? Because over time, your monthly payment stays the same, but more of it goes to principal as opposed to the mortgage. But at 6.75%, which is pretty close to what we're seeing these days, right? You're writing off $53,000 in mortgage interest in year one and $2,200 in year 30. Over time, you are paying a ton more to the bank in mortgage interest. How much, you might ask? Well, it's pretty significant. You're paying about $1,800 more a month to go to the bank. And over the course of the loan, it's about $600,000 more in mortgage interest. And so that is something we need to think about when we're making a decision like this. I think it's important to keep in mind that mortgage rates today are higher than they were for a period of time, but they are not higher than they've been historically. You're just anchored to rates that were very low, pushed lower by the Fed and quantitative easing and all these and 0% interest rates for a very long time. And so that's the bias that's in the back of our minds. Another beautiful thing about homeownership, there's automated savings. If you ever struggle to save or to put stash money aside, you are building equity over time. You are required to pay that $3,000 a month, that $5,000 a month, whatever your mortgage payment is, because if not, you don't have a place to live, right? If you're renting, the idea that AJ proposed in the first half of this presentation of having maybe $2,000 a month in rent and $1,000 that goes to your investment account as opposed to a $3,000 mortgage is great if you can actually save that $1,000 a month. And a lot of folks can't. A lot of folks can't maintain that discipline of saving that money. And so there is forced savings, forced wealth building that happens when you are on the buy side of things. The market, can you pick a winner, right? I think in New York City, it's probably a little bit harder to do that these days with how high the market is. But if you're buying somewhere else, if you bought in Austin in 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, when Shane didn't buy in Austin, we were in Austin, the three of us last week, and we brought it up only about 3 or 4 times a day that he didn't buy there and didn't have that real estate hit. And so you can potentially buy in the right market, in the right place at the right time, and pick a winner. You shouldn't count on this, but that is a potential. You're not going to have that potential renting, right? You may have it if you're on the buy side of things. Taxes, right? Congress, the government, they all want to incentivize you to buy a home. I think it's a good thing, right? There's a few things that Congress likes to incentivize: home ownership, starting families, getting married, those sorts of. They've built the tax code around that. AJ?
Going to college, I was going to add.
Going to college, yeah. Saving for retirement. Those are like the 5 things that they care about the most, aside from giving big tax breaks to their friends. And so taxes are a big reason to buy, because you don't get to write off your rent, but you do get to write off your mortgage interest. You get to write off some of your property taxes, which has now been expanded under the big beautiful bill, also known as HR 1. And you get to exclude some of the capital gains on your property if you buy a home and it appreciates over time, right? And so that is huge, potentially $500,000 in gains that are tax-free. There are very few pieces of the tax code that give you that sort of tax break, which is very nice. Moving on, security, you have a place of your own. You can have as many pets as you want. If you're Curtis Sliwa and you're moving into Gracie Mansion potentially and you want to take all your cats with you, you can take all of them into your home, right? Landlords can't kick you out when they want to sell the building. And so there's security for you, there's security perhaps for family members that are living with you. And so that does bring some degree of peace of mind. So I don't know whose pets these are. We have a few team members actually who have quite a few pets. I think this might be from maybe from one of our Slack channels.
I think
Tangible,
that's Jessica's house, actually.
that's Jessica. That's Jessica's house. Yeah, there's a few dogs. We have several people who fostered kittens for a while. And so it's tangible. It's easy to understand. Real estate is something you can feel and touch. You can't touch the stock market. You can't touch your portfolio. Your family will be very proud of you. And investing in the stock market can be intimidating. I think the other thing that's nice about homeownership is that, like, hey, yes, the price might go up, the price might go down, but you likely don't check Zillow and see how much, unless you're a nerd like us, you don't check Zillow to see how much your home is worth all the time. And it doesn't really matter if you're planning to live there for 30 years. If it is slightly underwater with your portfolio, right? If that goes down, there is an emotional feeling, an emotional reaction to it. And so that's another piece that we see. Reason to buy. You do build equity over time. You can borrow against your home. Right now might not be the best time to do that, but who's to say that'll always be the case, right? If rates start to come down, we might see home values go up, rates come down, and your equity grow, where you can tap into that equity for a variety of things. Maybe it's for a renovation project. Maybe it's for sending kids off to college. Maybe it's for helping another family member buy their first home and have a down payment. So that's huge. You can lock in. I think this is number 2, but from a technical perspective, from a technical planning perspective, it is the number 1 reason to buy a home, which is you lock in your housing costs for a very long time. And so if you're buying a property and you lock in your mortgage, right? I don't know if that property is going to be worth more than it is today in a year. I don't know if it is in 5 years. Odds are it probably will be worth more than it is right now in 10 years. Even more likely in 15, 20 years. And so if you're going to stay there for 30 years and have a 30-year mortgage, your housing costs as a percentage of your income will be going down steadily that entire time, right? Because your mortgage will stay the same. Property taxes, some of the other costs will increase over time, but the biggest piece is principal and interest on your mortgage. That stays the same over the course of that loan, or maybe even goes down if you refinance. And so this is huge. Everybody that's complaining about their rent going up, all your friends who won't shut up about it, you're locking in your housing costs for a very long time. So if you're planning to stay somewhere for a considerable amount of time, and this is the home of your dreams, locking in a relatively low housing payment and knowing it's going to stay steady is a huge sell. And then finally, the feels. You can tear down the walls. You can put in new carpet. You can put in hardwood floors. You can, make as much noise as you want. You can stomp up and down. You can change it to make it look however you would like. And you get to make it feel like home, which there's only so much you can do of that with an apartment. And so when you are looking at your options between renting or buying and evaluating whether you should rent or whether you should buy, setting the numbers aside and understanding that there's an emotional side of this, and if you want to feel like home and you want to be there for a long time, this is a huge reason to go on team buy.
The feels, that's the best you got?
That's the best I have, and this is the same thing that you argued for 4 years straight. Yes, thank you. So we want to know, what's the winner? What does everybody think? I don't know, Ariel, if we have a poll ready to go on who won. If not, we could probably send one out here in a second. But we'd love to know, with this all in mind, what do we like? Or people can drop it in the chat.
Yeah, drop it in the chat.
Drop it in the chat. Do you feel like rent? Do you feel like buy? We are very much in the it depends column. It depends on your goals. It depends on what is financially important to you. But yeah, drop it in the chat. Would love to hear how folks are feeling as we reflect on this and decide, which one. And ultimately it comes down to what's important to you. What can you afford to do financially? What is your timeline, right, for making this sort of decision? So those are some of the factors. Yeah.
the Freaky Friday-ness of today's presentation was to illustrate that it really does depend. You know, John and I
Yes.
can effectively argue either way. I have a feeling at points in our lives we will go back and forth between being homeowners and renters. It really just
Yeah.
depends on what your market looks like and really what your 5-year plan looks like.
Yeah.
And I just keep coming back to this idea, John, that if you are not 100% sure that you're going to be in the same place for, some say 7, I say 5 years, like
Yeah.
it rarely makes sense to buy a house. It just
Yeah.
adds a layer of, even if you have a lot of money, it just
Yes.
adds a layer of complexity and headache that you just don't need in your life. And so much of what we do as financial planners is removing complexity and headache from your financial life. And sometimes real estate just adds that right back in after all this, careful planning that we've done. So that's really what it comes down to. And look, if you have a city you love and you want to be there and your family's there, like, great, set down
Yeah.
roots. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
save for a down payment and we'll help you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do have the poll up, and so please participate in the poll. Rent or buy. AJ and I will
We can't vote.
hold. We cannot vote apparently. And whoever wins, we will never let the other person live it down for the next 12 months. So,
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of questions that we need to get to, but some of the resources, AJ, that you really like here.
Oh yeah, I love the New York Times rent versus buy calculator. I wish I built it myself. Theirs just looks pretty, and their designers are fantastic. So use it. Just Google it. It's great. And then we also have a mortgage calculator that's really helpful if you're browsing those Zillow pages. Ignore what they say. Use ours. It's just pure math. It doesn't have any nonsense that they add or
We're not trying to sell you a
we're not trying
mortgage
to sell you
as part of
anything.
it.
You don't need to give us your email to use this calculator. It's just a resource for you to use.
Yeah.
And it's just a friendlier face than a realtor
Yeah.
trying to get your 3% commission. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, thanks for hanging with us again. This remains one of our. Ooh, I won by a landslide.
Wow. Wow.
I think I won by a higher percentage than you did the past 4 years. I don't remember losing that badly in the past.
83 to 17%. Wow. Wow. An electoral college.
Wow, a landslide. All right, well,
feel
this
like
webinar is now over. No, I'm just kidding.
no.
We've got all these great questions, so we're going to go through these questions we have here. And I see some of you plopping new questions in the chat. We are going to answer as many as we can. I don't have a hard stop, John, so I'm just going to keep going until we get through all these. So first question. John, I'm going to read this question. I think this is a good one for you. I'd love for you to answer this. Would it ever make sense to have your first home be an investment property? How does that compare to traditional investments?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We get this a lot for folks who want to get investment exposure to real estate, who want to tap into that market. And I think that the short answer is no. You really don't want to start out with investment property. You've never owned a home before. Now you're taking out debt to buy a property that you're not going to live in. So you're going to have a higher interest rate. You're going to have the carrying cost of, hey, I still need to pay rent somewhere else. And now I need to take this on. And so do I have a bad tenant? Do they not pay rent? Do we go through a COVID-like crisis where you can't evict them? And then you've got the headache that comes with owning a home of something is breaking, something's coming up. And honestly, I think it's much better for folks to cut their teeth on their own home and see what it's like to be a homeowner, the ups, the downs, the fun stuff on it before they decide they want to become a passive income mogul of sorts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've got another one. If I live in California, what is more profitable, renting or buying? I'm going to take this one as a part-time California resident and taxpayer. Great question. I have a slightly roundabout answer here, which is let's think about the greatest threat to owning a home in California right now, and that is the cost of homeowners insurance. So in my mind, you're using the word profitable. I'm going to use the word a better bet. What is a safer and better bet for the long-term renting or buying, given the amount of wildfires and coastal flooding and other disasters that we've seen? It is very difficult to get homeowners insurance at a reasonable cost right now. So if you can rent, you can just pay for something monthly, and if something bad happens, you can just move out and get renter's insurance, by the way, which costs a couple $100 a year, not hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially on these bigger properties. So my quick answer is California specifically, or anywhere natural disaster prone. I'm team rent hardcore right now, especially if you are looking for the first time.
And AJ, which state is Palm Springs in? Remind me.
It's in California. Not to be confused with Palm Beach, which is in Florida, which is very funny when the pilot says it. It says, well, we'll sure be landing in Palm Beach, and everyone goes,
whoa, 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 whoa. Probably slightly different clientele as well. I'll take number 3. You know, we need more space. Should we sell the apartment that has a 3% interest rate and buy a new home, or rent an apartment, or rent a new home? Right? Very big life decision. We've seen this a lot lately with folks where, hey, we locked in that good rate 5 years ago. Now we have 2 kids. What do we do? I don't want to walk away from this interest rate, but we also need more space. There are sometimes creative ways to solve this. I talked to somebody, a prospective client once, who was buying the small condo down the hall to have it as kind of like an in-law suite, a place for guests, an office, because they work from
That's
home.
more common than you think in New York City. I know anecdotally 3 different people who have done that. And just bought something in their building for, you know, a full-time childcare provider or someone to hang out with them.
Yeah. So that's a really cool way to approach it, perhaps. That might not be the option for everyone. I think what we ultimately need to do in this situation is evaluate your financial plan and understand, hey, how much home can we afford? Even the assumptions are going to be different. What can we sell this home for? Can we afford to buy the bigger home that you want, even in this different rate environment? Does that work or not? And that is very much it's hard to kind of give a rule of thumb answer to that question. It's very much personalized on what makes sense for you. And in some markets, especially when you're saying, hey, right, we want to stay in the city until the kids are of school age, we move to the suburbs, that sort of thing. Anything that puts your timeline at under 5 years for sure, under 7 years, might need to tilt you more in the rent category, especially in New York City where transaction costs are extremely high.
Yep. Yep.
AJ, I want to ask you this one though, because you've written about this a bit. There is big societal pressure. There is FOMO when it comes to buying a house, but then there's also this other side of these interest rates are very high. Grandma's telling me I'm throwing money away on rent. How should folks just deal with that whole kind of, there's an emotional side of this where they feel like they are losing a game because they are continuing to rent as opposed to buying a home?
Yeah, I think this is the hardest one, right? The biggest argument for buying a house is that you think you should, and your family thinks you should, and your friends think you should, and you think you should because that's the measure of success. And you feel like you haven't succeeded because you don't own the house that you live in. And my best advice for you is to get over that and look at the numbers and increase the amount of money that you are contributing to your future self, whether that's 401k at work or just investing in the market or investing in something interesting that you care about. Like watching that pile of money grow is, trust me, a lot more exciting than watching your Zillow price, like just these made up numbers. Like you are actually investing in things where you can actually control the outcome. You cannot control the outcome of what your house is going to be worth. You can control the outcome of how much money you are saving each month. So the way that I like to think about it is just like flip the script. Unfortunately, you can't throw a housewarming party in your portfolio. And if you're going to brag about your portfolio or the price of your house at a party, you're insufferable and you probably shouldn't go to parties at all.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I got one for you, John. Okay, so we're ages 72 and 85 with
I feel it some days.
10 to 20 year life expectancy. Oh my gosh. Okay, so should we rent or buy? Wow.
Yeah.
This hurts. Oh man.
And so here's the thing. I read this question yesterday. We were preparing for this event, and I looked at it again this morning and reflected on it quite a bit. And ultimately, the factors don't change. It's still the same considerations, regardless of where you are in life, whether you're 22 or 72. It's how long do you think you're reasonably going to be living in this home? It's a high transaction cost event. Do you want to lock in your housing costs or not? Do you want the maintenance and upkeep that comes from owning a home as opposed to renting one? And so I would say the demographics to me lean towards renting because you just likely don't want the headache and you probably want the flexibility of, hey, in the future, do we want to downsize? Is this the right spot for us? That sort of thing. And I've had conversations with my parents about whether they want to maintain a home on a half acre that's a few stories, that has a big driveway that gets filled up with snow, and about what they might do in the future. And so I think renting at that phase in life is a very good choice for folks. But I think all the factors we talked about throughout this entire presentation still apply, regardless of the stage in life you're in.
I agree, and I'll just add one item there, which is that if you do have children and you are at kind of that age group, 70s, 80s, 90s, and you're, you know, confronting this life expectancy question, that's a really great time to bring them into the conversation. Because yes, you should of course have your own interests in mind, you know, what's going to be more comfortable. But if you're looking at it purely from a financial decision, is it better to rent or, you know, continue living in the home we own or buy something new? That's probably a great time to have those estate planning conversations. Does your daughter want to buy your house from you? You know, is that a good option? Maybe she's not going to kick you out now, but should you talk to an estate planning attorney about that transfer and how to do it in the most tax efficient way, rather than, you know, going to the New York Times rent versus buy calculator and deciding what's best for you in the next 10 years. Think about the next generation, and what impacts it's going to have on them.
Yeah. There was a question in the chat, AJ, that asked, is the choice heavily influenced by geography in many markets, that it could be cheaper to buy over many years? Someone was told that after 5 years of renting, you're throwing money away.
Yeah, I mean, look, every decision is heavily influenced by geography. Like, let's just say that as a fact.
Yeah.
But it's also heavily influenced by your geography. I think the biggest decision is, are you going to stay in this place for the very long term? I know people who live in rent-controlled apartments in New York City who don't pay $5,000 a month for one bedrooms. They pay $2,500, and they've been in that apartment for 10 years, and there are very few signs that they're going to get kicked out. So, like,
and they're going to die there because that's what they want to do,
yeah,
right? They don't want to pay
probably.
more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're never going to leave. And like, that's great. And maybe it's a little too small, you know, maybe there's some sacrifices that get made. I'm not really answering your question, but yes, the geography does matter. I do not subscribe to the fact that this notion that you are throwing money away if you are renting. As we've discussed, that assumption, that phrase, you're throwing money away, assumes that housing prices grow faster than the stock market. That assumes that you are not doing any other investing outside of renting. So yes, if you are only spending money on rent and you're doing no saving and no investing of any other kind, you are not building equity in anything. If you have a 401k at work, or you're doing any other kind of investing and you're renting because it's cheaper and you didn't lock hundreds of thousands of dollars into one asset, no, you are not throwing money away at all. So whoever told you that, tell them to watch this and come see me after class.
Coming to YouTube near you.
All right, got another one. Ooh, I've rented for 23 years. I'm in a long distance relationship. I'm in LA. He's in San Francisco. Is it too late to find a beach house to retire in 8 years?
First of all, perfect amount of space, right? LA, San Francisco, a little bit of distance, always very nice. You want to have your own space. So totally agree. Is it too late to find a beach house to retire to in 8 years? No, I don't think so. I think if you start saving and really work towards that goal, you can do it. It depends on, what does that beach house look like? What does the rest of your financial situation look like? Are you moving in together in the beach house in 8 years? But I think 8 years is a nice chunk of time if you're diligent about it, want to work towards that goal.
Agree. Yeah. I'll also say, when we're thinking about like vacation homes, and John, you and I have this conversation all the time, and I think I may have accidentally talked you out of buying a vacation home. Look at your calendar and see, am I actually going to be spending more than 8 weeks there? Pull it out right now and do the math. Because if the answer is no, you're probably better off just getting one of those super expensive summer rentals. Yes, I know it's more expensive in the summer. I know it feels like a crazy amount of money to spend, but it's nothing in comparison to buying a home that's going to be a financial stress and that you're not going to be in 10 or 11 or 12 months out of the year. So tread carefully with the vacation home that you're not going to be in full time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is it better to buy or rent during a midlife career change? I think the last word in that question answers the question.
Yeah,
Change. When
change.
you're in a period of change in your life, I think renting is better, especially if you already are renting. You want that flexibility, which you talked about is basically the number one reason to
Yeah.
rent.
I think we're forgetting something here. We've talked about renting versus buying. We forgot about the third option, which is just inheriting. Inheriting property that's fully paid off, where you only have to pay the property taxes, is better than both. So I don't know why everyone just doesn't do that.
Yeah, yeah, pull themselves up by their bootstraps
Yeah, that I'm kidding for
and
the
inherit.
recording. That was
Yeah,
sarcasm.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Uh,
is there any context if you already own a home with a 3% interest rate where it makes sense to sell and
mm,
rent instead?
mm. Very
Hmm.
interesting. And I've actually seen a few like startups pop up to like try to like help you like capitalize on your super low interest rate and potentially like sell your really cheap mortgage to like the next person moving in. I haven't actually seen anyone do a transaction successfully. I've only like seen things pop up. I mean, having 3% interest rate is not the information we need. That's nice. I'm glad that you got that. That's fantastic. The information we need is what is your total price for what is your total cost of housing each month. So that to me is really the decision of when it makes sense to sell versus rent. But I get it. I mean, that's an emotional one. Like it's hard to let go when you're watching us idiots get 8-9% mortgages right now, and you've got a 3%. That's a pretty nice thing to shove in someone's face. So I don't know. I lean towards hold on to it, or become a landlord and rent it out and move across town for a few years.
It's an option. It's an option. Just be ready
Yep.
for the 3 a.m. toilet flooded phone call. How's the New York market trending? Will buying ever look like a good option? We talked a little bit about the New York market to lead this off and where rents were headed, which is upward. Housing prices also not great in New York. Will buying ever look like a good? I mean, you bought AJ. Do you feel like buying ever will look like a good option, or it's just like a
That's
necessary evil for people who want to own a home there?
like to me, this is not it. No, financially, number like side by side, no. What renting is almost always better in a market like New York City. Like we run the numbers for 30 years, no. But the buying aspect, you want your kids to go to this specific school. You want to have a specific paint color. Like there are really good reasons to buy. And there are success stories, right? There are success stories of finding really good deals. If you have an amazing design sense and a property isn't moving and you think it looks like it's slightly priced 20 or 30% lower than other properties and you're really good at carpentry and making things look pretty, could you spend 30% less than anyone else on a renovation and sell it 10 years from now at double, and really make out well? Yes, absolutely. So I think finding a good deal, they do exist in New York. You have to be creative, and I think you have to be willing to make some sacrifices. For those of you who are clients, you have probably seen a document that John and I wrote years ago, which is basically like, come up with your non-negotiables before you even start looking, right? For my husband and I, it can't be a more than 3-floor walk up. We lived in a 3rd floor walk up and it sucked. Like it just was mentally, like I didn't like it. Like I would literally not go outside because I didn't want to walk up the stairs. And like that was really important. And we ended up falling in love with a place that has an elevator that opens into the apartment. And that to me was like, I'm good. Like, and it had to have a washer and dryer in it. There were other things that were like secondary and tertiary non-negotiables that we compromised on. And frankly, high ceilings was one of my non-negotiables, and we moved into a place with lower ceilings, and I regret it. I wish our ceilings were 11 foot, not 9 foot. So if anyone wants to buy a sick 3-bedroom apartment with 9 foot ceilings in Fort Greene, you know where to find me.
And so we have another question in the chat, which is, what if you already own and the home you have is nicer than the amount that rent could get you? I think it's relative to the like midlife career change, life changes, that sort of thing. And I think if you already own a home and you're happy with the cost structure and
Sit
you're happy with the
pretty.
place you have,
Yeah,
keep it. Keep
yeah,
it.
for sure.
Yeah. If you like your home you live in, you can keep
Well, I
it.
think that's kind of what I was joking about with the inheritance is, we've outlined the freedom you get with renting, but like if you are already 10, 7, 10, 15 years into your mortgage, the math is different, and we're happy to run the math for you, but we're comparing a new purchase, buying something versus renting something in this market. So yeah, the math, the spreadsheet is radically different. Once we have already built up some equity, we've already started to pay down the principal of that mortgage. I think, John touched on this, but in the first, depending on how your mortgage is structured, like in the beginning, you're mostly just paying off interest. So once you start to eat into that principal, that's when, okay, you've been in this home for a long time. That's why home ownership makes so much more sense over long term. So we're talking about short periods, right? Because most people don't stay in those homes. If everyone stayed in their home for more than 30 years and paid off that mortgage, buying would win almost every time. But the numbers just so clearly show us that that is not the reality. And we will all sit here and say, we're going to be in this home forever. And I promise you, you will not be.
Yeah. Last question here. Perspective on renting in New York City versus buying upstate, not as an investment property, but as a getaway with family and friends. AJ, I know you have thoughts on this.
I do have thoughts on this. I can't remember any of the points I made. I did write about this. So if you want to go to my Substack, Money Changes Everything, I have 5,000 words about buying a vacation home first. Yeah, honestly, I love this play. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think New York City is a great place to rent, but you want an escape and you want something that's yours. And it's just, frankly, a lot cheaper to go outside the city. I did get a lot of flack from those folks who were like, we don't want you city types.
Not in my backyard, AJ.
Exactly, which I'm happy to talk about because generally I think it's better for everyone, but that's another time. That's another webinar for another day. I love this. I think you have the flexibility to move within the city. You own a cabin or a lake house or whatever that doesn't have significant upkeep costs, right? Hopefully it's somewhat turnkey. Maybe you can rent it out for a little cash, but do not rely on that to afford it.
Don't count on it.
That's just a bonus. So yeah, I think a little getaway is a great idea, but emphasis on the little, right? Emphasis on the little. This should not
a small 5,000 square foot cabin, okay, on a waterfront property at a lake in upstate New York with 4 ATVs. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. And anecdotally, this is what a lot of our clients and peers are doing. This is kind of where we've all landed and why John and I are mostly team rent in New York City. Like, it just makes sense. You don't need to buy if you've got a large family, you've got 3 kids, you're looking at $2, $3, $4 million housing costs in New York City. Easily. You're looking at a 5-bedroom house that, is kind of rustic and cute that you're going to spend at least 8 weeks in a year. You're looking at, I don't know, definitely under $1 million. So the math is just, the math ain't mathin' to own in New York sometimes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, those are all the questions we had. One last resource, which is this Fannie Mae lookup tool, AJ, that allows you to get a better sense of what type of mortgage loans you'd be eligible for. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today for the 5th annual Rent versus Buy. Rent wins yet again. AJ, congratulations.
Well, next year maybe we'll walk in and we'll flip a coin and we'll have to on the spot argue both ways.
There we go. Who knows where rates will be? We'll get a full copy of the recording of this up on our website, brooklynify.com. If you missed part of it, if you have friends, family that need to watch it, if you need to send it to your grandmother or your parents and tell them this is why you are renting so that they can send us a nasty email, aj@brooklynify.com, john@brooklynify.com. Keep it short and sweet. But yeah, more live events coming.
And just remember, inheritance wins every time.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, AJ.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.